In this video, I'm going to challenge myself to survive 100 days on this island in hardcore Minecraft. And despite having limited resources, my goal is to transform the entire island into the ultimate survival base. Kicking it off on day 1, I spawned on this weird sandy area just beside the island, so after collecting some sugarcane, I went over to the actual mainland and chopped down my first tree. Using the wood, I crafted my first wooden pickaxe and then dug down to get some cobblestone. With the cobble, I crafted all of the basic tools that we need, as well as a furnace. I also stumbled upon some iron while digging, so I went back with my upgraded pickaxe to gather it up. After smelting it down, I made some shears and then went looking for some sheep. I really want to get some wool so that I can make a bed and sleep the night away. I only found one sheep, so while I waited for it to grow its wool back, I continued exploring the island. I spotted a shipwreck just off the coast, so I crafted a boat and made my way over to gather the loot. I found more iron, coal, wheat and potatoes, and a treasure map. After going pirate mode, I made my way back to the island and sheared the sheep again, which luckily gave me 2 wool, so I have enough to make a bed now. And I was getting hungry at this point, so I made some bread with the wheat that we found and then slept away the first night. I began day 2 by making some chests for my items and then went looking for the buried treasure using the map that we found. And funnily enough, it ended up being right beside where we spawned. And it did have pretty good loot, but I really would have loved to get some diamonds, but oh well, what are you gonna do? Before heading back to the island, I wanted to reveal the rest of the map, because for some reason, leaving them unexplored just kinda bothers me. While doing so, I stumbled upon another shipwreck where I found moss blocks, a bunch more iron, some armor templates, and another treasure map. Sadly, the treasure map was for the same one that we already found, so I continued revealing the rest of the maps and then went back home. Back at the island, I unloaded all of my items and then crafted a full set of iron tools as well as an iron helmet and shield. I spent some time cutting down trees and then finished off the day by setting up a simple sugarcane farm as well as a potato and wheat farm. On day 3, I went full lumberjack mode and spent the entire day cutting down trees to make room for builds. In the process, I got 3.5 stacks of oak logs and close to a stack of birch logs, which I'm sure are gonna come in handy. I started off day 4 by crafting a bunch of fences and fence gates so that we can build 2 small animal pens. The larger of the 2 will be for cows and the smaller one for chickens. Conveniently, there were a couple of chickens close by, so I lured them over to the smaller pen and bred them. Next, I went looking for some cows, and I would have loved to bring the sheep over as well, but sadly, this wolf had other ideas.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
After grieving over the loss of our sheepy friend for a few moments, I carried on by bringing a couple of cows over to the pen and breeding them up. We're going to need a lot more building blocks, so I started digging a quarry where we can gather a bunch of resources. It's looking like a pretty boring hole right now, but if we add more details, I think we can get it looking pretty cool. I took a short break from digging the quarry at the start of day 5 by expanding the sugarcane farm and breeding the cows and chickens. After that, it was back to digging and making the hole look natural. A lot of this cobblestone is temporary, it's just all I kinda have to build with right now, so we'll switch it out with other blocks later. It's still looking pretty rough at the moment, but I put in a few pillars to look like it's supporting the ceiling. I want to extend a staircase all the way down to diamond level, so I started digging further down. I went back up to the surface, but it was dark, and I didn't want to risk dying to any mobs, so I spent the rest of the night digging further and further down, picking up any valuable resources that I found along the way. I went back up to the surface on day 6 and dropped off a bunch of my items since my inventory was full. After that, I expanded the sugarcane farm and then checked on our crops as well as our animals. Heading back to the quarry, I started adding more details to the entrance, like barrels and chests, patches of coarse dirt, and more pillars. I want to mainly use coarse dirt for the ground, but I'm all out of gravel, so on day 7, I went to the ocean to gather some up. I also found some iron and lapis while I was at it, which was a nice bonus. With a bunch of gravel obtained, I could now make more coarse dirt and begin replacing the rest of the ground. I really wish I had spruce slabs to use in between the coarse dirt, but sadly there's no spruce trees on the island. Honestly, not having spruce wood might actually be the hardest part of this challenge for me. I figured granite slabs would work decently instead, so I gathered some up and replaced the cobblestone slabs. The quarry is starting to look decent, but I'm not quite happy with it yet, so I continued detailing on day 8. I added more barrels into the wall, which I thought looked pretty cool, and then I spent some time adding a bunch of texture variation into the walls, as well as using slabs to smooth out all of the hard edges. I used my shears to gather up some grass, and then dotted it around the outside of the entrance, as well as a bit inside. After messing around with things for a few more minutes, I was happy with how it was looking, so I decided to keep digging down until we reached diamond level. I continued digging into day 9 and ended up running into a trial chamber. I'd love to explore it, but I'm way undergeared right now, so I left it be for now and kept digging down. As I was digging down, I found my first diamonds, which was awesome. I continued digging and stopped at Y-57 to do some strip mining. I was able to find a few more diamonds and then decided to craft a diamond pick since mining all of this deep slate with an iron one is starting to drive me just a little bit insane. I spent the rest of the day mining, but sadly, I wasn't able to find any more diamonds. However, I was able to gather a bunch of deep slate and tough blocks, which is going to come in handy for some future builds. On day 10, I made my way back to the surface, and I placed stairs as I went so that it'll be easier to come down here next time. Back at the top, I dropped off all of my items and then spent some time harvesting the sugarcane and crops. I expanded the sugarcane all the way along the coastline, and honestly, this is probably overkill, but at least once it all grows, we should have more than enough paper for 15 bookshelves for our enchanting setup. We're also going to need leather to make bookshelves, so I bred the cows as well. I think it's finally time that we begin our starter house, so I did some basic terraforming to make room for it, and then began planning where I wanted the walls to be. With the first floor walls in place, I dug out a spot for the front door, as well as some windows. I continued working on the house on day 11 by building up some pillars for the second floor. After that, I spent some time planning out the shape of the roof line. I went for a deep slate brick trim, and then filled in the rest of the roof with oak wood. With the roof in place, I built up the chimney using cobblestone, and then started replacing some of the deep slate in the first floor wall with oak logs. At the start of day 13, I took a quick break from building to breed the cows, and then I went hunting for some clay in the ocean so that we can make bricks. I started smelting the clay and then got back to building. After contemplating what I should use for the walls on the second floor, I decided on stripped oak logs at the front, and then for the sides, I used a combination of diorite, polished diorite, and birch logs. It's a little bit of an odd mixture of blocks, but honestly, I think it kind of works. With the build palette of the house locked in now, I got to work filling in the remaining walls on day 14. To give the house some character, I also built a small balcony at the back of the house overlooking the water. As it started to rain, I finished the chimney using cobblestone and tough blocks. At the top, I placed a couple of campfires and surrounded them with oak trapdoors. To cap it off, I used cobblestone slabs. It's a pretty simple design, but I think it fits the house pretty well. Next, I spent some time texturing the first floor walls with a variety of deep slate, tough, and cobblestone blocks. Our house is getting pretty close to being done now, so I added the windows as well as the doors. I started day 16 by breeding the cows, and then got back to detailing the house by placing some buttons on the sides of the logs, and because I can't help myself, I also added some texture variation into the roof using birch stairs and cobbled deep slate. Next, I made some flower pots and collected some leaves so that I could add some bushes in front of the windows. I really love how this adds some color to our house. I removed the grass blocks behind the house to make room for a patch of coarse dirt. In the process, I had to get rid of the crop farm, but that's alright since I want to make a bigger one soon anyways. I finished detailing the back by adding a bit of short grass and then got to work creating a path leading from the house over to the quarry entrance. I absolutely love connecting my builds with paths, it just makes the whole place feel so much more alive. And to blend the path into the surrounding environment, I used a bit of short grass. After breeding the cows again on day 18, I got attacked by a skeleton and my hearts actually got kinda low, so I decided not to risk it and went inside to get started on the interior of the house. First off, I removed all of the grass blocks and then replaced them with oak planks. After that, I built a staircase so that we have a way to get to the second floor. For the floor itself, I built it using birch wood, and honestly, I'm surprised that it doesn't look too bad. I feel like not having access to spruce wood is really forcing me to be more creative with my block choices. Speaking of blocks, I'm almost completely out, so on day 19, I made a shovel and then went down into the mines to gather more blocks. While I was down here, I also gathered iron so that I could make more armor. Hopefully this will help us not get shot by skeletons anymore, which, let's be honest, is pretty embarrassing. I spent the rest of the day strip mining and was able to find 7 more diamonds, which is great. On day 20, I went back to the surface and used those diamonds to craft a sword and axe. It's really nice to have full diamond tools now. I need more wood to finish the interior of our house, so I continued my deforestation project by removing another huge section of trees. I think we should have all the materials we need now, so I got back to building. First, I added a railing to the stairs using oak trapdoors so that we don't accidentally fall down, and then I got to work fixing up the ceiling. After that, I added some furnaces to this corner, and then got to work detailing this wall by the window using a crafting table, stone cutter, and a bunch of barrels. And for a final touch, I added a flower pot and lantern. This wall here was looking pretty boring, so I used this very creepy new painting to fill out the space, and then went to sleep while this villager stared me directly in the soul. Once the nightmare was finally over, I added a couple more windows into the wall to make the space feel more open. After decorating that wall, I finished off the second floor by adding a couple of shelves to fill out the space. Moving down to the first floor, I added a crafting table and decorated pot beside the front entrance. As the sun was beginning to set, I heard a wandering trader outside, and even though I couldn't see him, I was still able to trade with him for a vine, which will come in handy for making stuff like mossy cobblestone. I also sacrificed the llamas for their leads and leather, as I'm kinda desperate for resources on the island. The next thing I added was a carpet using lapis blocks, since I don't really have any wool right now. After adding a few more decorations, I hid some lighting in the corner by the stairs using an indoor plant. To finish off the room, I added a painting above the bed, and then had the idea to display the treasure map that we found all the way back on day 1. Last but not least, I began moving all of my items inside, and I'm organizing everything as I'm going so that it'll be easier to find items in the future. I finished sorting the remaining items on day 24, and it's super satisfying to see everything neatly put away. With the starter house now finished, I was pumped to get started on our next project. Without wasting any time, I began prepping the area by doing some basic terraforming and harvesting all of the sugarcane along the coastline. On day 25, I began constructing a large dock along the water using oak slabs. I decided not to build it completely straight as I thought that'd be a bit boring, so it took me some trial and error to get the shape right. I finished getting the basic shape of the dock in place on day 26, and then as I like to do, I got totally distracted terraforming this small hillside. All I was trying to do was smooth out the terrain, as well as create a bit of a flat spot that we can use for future builds. I got back to work on the dock the following day by planning out where I wanted the pillars to go using dirt blocks. Once I was happy with the locations, I built up pillars using oak logs. And we still need some smaller docks that are actually stretching into the water, so I started building those next. Once I knew where I wanted them to go, I widened the docks to 3 blocks wide. The diagonal ones look just a little bit goofy, but overall I'm really happy with the main structure of our dock. I wanted to move on to adding more details, but I was all out of oak wood, so I spent the rest of the day cutting down more trees. To detail the docks themselves, I first extended fences all the way down to the ocean floor to support them. After that, I created a small railing of sorts using oak trapdoors, and for a bit of texture variation, I mixed in a few birch slabs. For some final touches, I added a barrel and chest, as well as a boat. With one of the smaller docks done, I got to work detailing the rest. Of course, I ran out of wood again though, so I cut down more trees on day 30 and then got back to detailing. I also mixed in some stripped oak and birch logs into the surface of the dock to add more texture variation. I'm quite limited with what blocks I have to build with right now, but I thought this helped make it look less like a giant blob of the oak plank texture. To help fill out the space, I added a bunch of barrels and chests scattered around the area. And I also added some fenced sections just to add more variety. And as the sun began to set, I finished the day by connecting the dock to our path system. I'll probably add more details to the dock later, but for now, I'm happy to call it finished. On the start of day 31, I set up a simple vine farm using oak fences and oak planks. After that, I felt like making our mine entrance look more in place, so I created large boulders surrounding it out of tuff and cobblestone blocks. To create a lush vibe, I blended everything together using oak leaves and short grass. I spent the remainder of the day extending our path up the hill, which is going to lead us to the location of our next build, and that is going to be a giant wheat farm. I got to work marking out the perimeter using cobblestone, doing a bit of basic terraforming along the way to make sure that everything was looking good. Once I was happy with the shape, I started building up the cobblestone walls a bit higher, making use of slabs to add jogs and height differences, which make the wall look a lot more natural. I finished off the day by connecting our path to the entrance of the farm. I continued building on day 33 by adding texture variation into the walls using deep slate and tough blocks. My pickaxe was about to break, so I made a pit stop at our house to make a new one with the last 3 diamonds that we have. After I finished adding all of the texture variation, I dotted oak leaves as well as short grass all around the outside of the wall to give it a natural touch. Moving inside of the walls, instead of just having one giant blob of wheat filling the entire thing, I used path blocks to divide it up into some different sections. I then got to work adding water sources and tilling all of the dirt. A lot of the water I was able to hide underneath of the walls, which is nice since it's out of sight and also isn't taking up any of our crop space. To traverse the 2 levels, I put some slabs so that we don't accidentally trample any of our plants jumping up and down. After tilling the rest of the ground on day 35, I then planted all of the wheat seeds that I currently have. I had the idea to replace the oak trapdoors on the dock with copper ones, and I also added trapdoors on top of all of the pillars, and I think it looks a lot better now. It really helped add more color and break up all of the oak. On day 36, I decided to actually use the dock for once and take out a boat to explore the ocean. I spotted an ocean monument, but I'm still way undergeared, so I stayed away. I did find another shipwreck though, which had some carrots. I'm honestly super stoked to unlock another crop, and we can also use these to breed the pigs on our island. Feeling excited, I immediately went back home and planted the carrots in our new farm so that we can get some more. While those grow, I checked in on our cows and bred them again. And to finish off the day, I cut down some trees as I'm constantly running out of wood whenever I want to build something. So much so that I spent all of day 37 cutting down trees as well. To all the tree huggers out there, you may want to close your eyes as I ended up cutting down every single tree except for this one that has a beehive on it, as well as this large one by our starter house, as I think it looks pretty cool. Don't worry though, we'll add a lot of trees back later. Now that I could see the terrain better, I used this as an opportunity to do some basic terraforming all over the island. I spent all of day 39 and 40 terraforming as well. I did my best to smooth everything out and get rid of any weird jogs that I was seeing. Unfortunately, my shovel broke and I don't have any more dirt, so I decided it was time for another mining trip considering that I don't have any more diamonds. Before heading down though, I killed the stray cows that were roaming around since I'm almost out of food. I also took a few minutes to do some other chores, like expand the wheat, carrot, and vine farms, and then I also bred the cows again. With that out of the way, I gathered everything that I thought we would need for our mining trip and then went down below. I was able to find 5 more diamonds before running out of torches, so I went up to a higher level and strip mined for some coal. I'm really low on a lot of resources because somehow it's day 41 and I still haven't found a legit cave to explore, which honestly is pretty frustrating. After gathering a bit more coal on day 42, I went back down to diamond levels and continued to strip mine. After finding a few more diamonds and crafting a new pickaxe, I finally ran into a cave. After dealing with this creeper and chicken jockey, I went exploring. I continued mining on day 43 and was able to find more diamonds. And while I had the opportunity, I also gathered up enough obsidian for an enchanting table and nether portal. I spent the rest of the day gathering up all of the diamonds and iron that I could find. I ran out of torches again and was pretty desperate, so I used some furnaces to turn my logs into charcoal so that I could make some more. While I was making a pit stop, I also made a new shield, as I really don't want to risk this breaking while I'm in the mines. Now that we're geared up again, I went on the hunt for even more iron and diamonds. While mining, I stumbled upon a skeleton spawner that had pumpkin and melon seeds, and it's really awesome to unlock even more crops. And I did take the saddle and horse armor that were there too, even though it's probably going to be useless. I also took the opportunity to mine all of the mossy cobblestone so that we can use it in our future builds. After that, I continued mining until I ran out of torches and food. It was a pretty successful mining trip. In the end, I got 25 diamonds, pretty much a full stack of iron, and a bunch of gold, lapis, and redstone. I went back up to the surface on day 45 and dropped off all of my items. Afterwards, I did my chores again by expanding the wheat and carrot farms and breeding the cows. Finally, it was time to get back to terraforming, so I spent the rest of the day finishing off the top of the hill. At the back of the island, there was a sharp drop-off, so I got to work building some custom cliffs to fill the gap. I went for a pretty simple block palette of cobblestone, tuff, and deep slate. And then to tie everything together, I dotted some oak leaves and short grass around the area. Honestly, I liked it so much that I got to work filling in this other gap that I found using the same building technique. I finished the cliff up on day 47, and after a few final touches to the terrain, I'm feeling really happy with the shape of our island now. I wasn't 100% sure if this was worth all the time and effort, but if we take a look at the before and after, I think it's safe to say that it was. The crops had some time to grow while we did all the terraforming, so I took some time to expand the farm again. I also collected all of the vines and then tore down the temporary vine farm as it's a bit of an eyesore. We might need to make another one later, but since we got a lot of mossy cobblestone from the skeleton spawner, we should be good for now. I finished off the day by organizing my items and smelting down the iron from our mining trip. The next thing that I want to make is a barn, since I feel bad for our animals stuck in their boring pens. After gathering up all of the materials I thought I'd need, I began to plan out where I wanted the walls to go. That's when I remembered I wanted to use some moss blocks for this build, so I took a quick pit stop to make some. I bone mealed one of the moss blocks that we found on a shipwreck to make a bunch of it. I continued building on day 49, and of course it started to rain, but I pushed through and got a big chunk of the barn built up. Unfortunately, I ran out of diorite though, so we're going to have to gather up more so we can finish the roof. On day 50, I went down into the quarry and mined diorite until my pickaxe was almost broken. At that point, I went up to the surface to drop off all of the diorite as well as make a new pick. Since I was in the mining mood now, I decided to just spend the rest of the day down here mining a bunch of blocks so that hopefully we won't keep running out whenever I want to build something. I also found more iron and coal while I was at it, so that was a nice bonus. To celebrate making it to the halfway point in the challenge, it's time to go check in on my cats. Munchie is looking clueless as ever, and Mittens is enjoying her 10th nap of the day. If you're enjoying the video so far, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button as it really helps out the channel. With a bunch of building blocks gathered up, I went back to the surface and dropped off my items and then got back to building. I finished the main exterior of the barn and it's really starting to shape up now. My favorite thing about the build is probably the deep slate roof with the diorite trim. I think it's a great combination. One of the blocks that I want to decorate the barn with is hay bales, so I gathered up a bunch of the wheat from our farm. While I was at it, I also expanded the wheat into some of the other sections of the farm. I stayed up too late, so I started day 52 by killing some mobs and then got back to work adding some final details to the barn. First, I added some hay bales to this corner as it was looking kind of bland. For this big flat wall at the back, I detailed it with decorated pots, oak leaves, and a bunch of flower pots with saplings in them. Next, I got to work adding some lanterns to light up the inside of the barn. On the back wall, I created a shelf using polished granite slabs and then detailed it with chests, a lantern, and hay bales. Using fences, I divided the inside into multiple pens for our animals. On day 53, I finished the interior by replacing some of the ground with coarse dirt. With the interior done, it was finally time to bring our animals over, so I started with the chickens. After bringing them to their new home, I got to work bringing the cows over, which was a lot more difficult because of just how many there are. I got most of them into the pen, but I was struggling with the last few, so I had to sacrifice them for the cause. Honestly though, I've been surviving on apples for like the past 10 days, so it'll be nice to have some better food. After removing all of the old pens, I found a couple of pigs and brought them to the barn as well. With our barn finished, I got to work connecting it to the rest of our builds with a path. I thought a pond would fit perfectly in the gap between the paths, so I got to work digging a hole. Once I was happy with the shape, I filled the entire thing with water and then added some grass and sugarcane around the perimeter for a pop of color. And if you didn't know, you can use string to stop sugarcane from growing taller, and I utilized that trick here to give the whole thing a more natural look. As the sun was beginning to set, I noticed that this area was quite dark, so I placed a few lanterns along the dock. On day 55, I spent some time expanding both our wheat and carrot farms, as well as adding some lanterns throughout the area. I was able to get almost the entire thing filled in with crops. There's just one small section of carrots that needs to be filled in, but I ran out. Speaking of running out, I'm almost completely out of wood again, so before that happens, I thought it'd be smart to set up a simple tree farm. I first placed rows of slabs 7 blocks above the ground. These should hopefully stop the giant trees from growing, which are a real pain to cut down. While I was building, a wandering villager spawned, so I checked out his trades. I could have unlocked beetroot seeds, but let's be honest, those are like kinda useless, so I did what had to be done and removed him from the island the only way that I knew how. After that little interruption, I finished off the farm by placing down a bunch of saplings. And with our tree farm finished, I went over to the barn and ended the day by breeding the animals. The next thing that I want to make is an enchanting house, so I got to work building it up on day 56. I'm getting really tired of mining everything so slow, and my tools are breaking all the time, so this is far overdue. By the time I was done getting the walls and roof up, it was already day 57. For some final touches to the exterior, I added a door, bushes, windows, a small seating area, and lanterns to light the whole thing up. Moving to the inside, I got rid of all of the grass blocks and replaced them with a birchwood floor. We're going to need a bunch of bookshelves for our enchanting setup, so I started gathering up all of the materials that we need. We already have a bunch of sugarcane from before, so it's pretty much just leather that we need. I want to breed the cows one more time before we sacrifice them to the bookshelf gods, so I harvested a bunch of wheat and also filled in the last empty carrot patch while I was at it. After breeding the cows, I did what had to be done and collected a bunch of leather. Using the leather, I made tons of books and then crafted 15 bookshelves. While I was at it, I also crafted the actual enchanting table as well. We should have everything that we need now, so I got to work placing everything down inside of our enchanting house. It's pretty cozy in here, but we can still get level 30 enchants with this setup, so we're all good. For some extra detail, I put some flower pots on top of the bookshelves. I also added a grindstone, as well as a bunch of chests for storage on either side of the house. And it took me pretty much all of the iron that I have, but I also made an anvil. Since I have 30 levels, I decided to enchant my pickaxe and ended up getting Fortune 2 and Unbreaking 3. It's not the best, but at least it'll help us get more diamonds when we find them. I spent the remainder of the day connecting the house to the rest of our builds with a path. On day 59, I also added a path leading to the seating area behind the house. To blend everything together, I used bone meal to add grass and flowers. I did remove most of the tall grass though, as I don't want the area to look too overgrown. This side of the island is really starting to shape up, and I think we can fill out the rest of the space using a bunch of trees. I'll most likely add a few more details here and there, but I'm feeling really happy with how it's looking right now. I did feel like this one section of the dock was looking a bit out of place though, so I decided to just remove it. Most of the oak trees in our tree farm had grown, so I started day 60 by chopping them all down. Weirdly, none of the birch ones grew, so I think I'll need to rework those at some point to get them working. After cutting down the trees, I spent some time organizing my items because my inventory is an absolute mess right now. Once my items were all neatly put away, I harvested a bunch of wheat and then used water bottles to create mud blocks. Combining the wheat and mud, I was able to make some packed mud, which I'll need for my next build. And that build is going to be a boat. I mean, come on, we can't build a giant dock but not make any boats. I made it primarily out of birchwood, just so that it would contrast the oak dock a little bit. And for the sail, I used diorite walls, similar to this design that I found by SV Gravity. I don't really build boats too often, so I'm actually quite happy with how this one turned out. For a final little detail, I placed some ladders on the side, which honestly helped a lot. After finishing the boat, I noticed that the birch trees still hadn't grown, so I removed the slabs above them, and hopefully that'll fix it. On day 62, I went down into the quarry and used moss blocks and bone meal to collect an azalea. I used it to make an azalea tree and then collected all of the leaves so that we can use them for future builds. I also went back down into the mine and collected the moss, which I then used to add even more vegetation around the quarry entrance. After that little distraction, I spent the rest of the day terraforming the hillside to make room for our next build. Since we found pumpkin and melon seeds in the skeleton spawner all the way back on day 44, I think it's finally time that we make a dedicated farm for them. After doing a bit more terraforming on day 63, I first planned out the perimeter of the farm using oak slabs. With that in place, I then divided the area up into 2 wide sections, again using slabs. To hydrate the farm, I waterlogged a bunch of the slabs and then created a more decorative trim using trapdoors. I then added rows of fences on top of the slabs to further divide up the different sections. After tilling the ground, I planted all of the melon and pumpkin seeds that I have. It's a pretty simple build, but once the crops grow and add a pop of color, I think it's going to look really nice. With the farm done for the time being, I connected it to our pathway system the same way that I've been doing with all of our builds. While doing all of this building, our trees had time to grow, so I cut them all down on day 65. And I'm happy to say that the birch trees finally grew. After cutting down all the trees, I started gathering up all the materials we're going to need for our next build. It looks like I'm going to need some more tough blocks though, so I guess it's time for another trip down into the mines. I gathered a bunch of tuff on day 66 and even found a few more diamonds while I was at it. Since I was down here, I also did a bit of strip mining and ended up finding even more diamonds. After heading back to the surface, I dropped off my items and then crafted a full set of diamond armor. I mean, hey, it only took us 67 days, but we're looking really snazzy now. I'm back up to level 30 again, so I enchanted my axe and ended up getting Silk Touch, Efficiency 4, and Unbreaking 3. Not too bad at all. I spent the rest of the day crafting all of the blocks that we'll need for our next build, as well as expanding the melons since a couple grew. On day 68, I started building a house that I want to hide a vine farm in. Am I really going to use this vine farm that much? Probably not, but I want an excuse to build a cool house, and that's the best that I could come up with. And I've been calling it a house, but honestly, it's going to be more like a mini castle. I built the main structure out of a bunch of different tough, stone, and cobblestone blocks, and then for the second floor, I tried to incorporate a lot more moss, as I felt like it fit the theme of a vine farm quite well. With the exterior finished, I got to work inside by first replacing the ground with birch planks. I'm keeping the interior really simple, since I want to leave space to grow vines, but I did add a ladder to get up to the second floor. I want to store all of the vines up here after we collect them, so I got to work detailing the room by first fixing up the ceiling and adding a few lanterns. To fill out the rest of the space, I just used a bunch of barrels and chests. We can also access the walkway that goes around the build from here, and it's really cool to look down at all of our builds. To finish the interior, I spammed vines all over the walls on the first floor. They should spread down the walls, and then we can collect them whenever we need them. The build wouldn't be complete unless we connected it to our path system, of course, so I spent a few minutes putting that together. After that, I checked in on our pumpkin and melon farm, and was almost able to get the whole thing filled in. To end off the day, I used bone meal to add more greenery around our builds, as well as help fill in some of the empty spaces. On day 71, a wandering trader spawned, and I bought some dripstone off of him that we can possibly use to set up a lava farm. That's a future project though, because right now I want to build up a sugarcane farm. I set up some simple rows bordered by path blocks, and then hid water using oak slabs. I planted all of the sugarcane and then got to work building a path leading to the farm. And since it's kind of on this lower part of the hill, I had to build a small staircase leading down to it. After finishing the path on day 72, I got the rest of the pumpkin and melon farms filled in and then cut down all of the trees. Continuing with a few other chores, I harvested some wheat and then checked in on our animals since it's been a while since we've seen them. Plus, it's always a good time spamming chicken eggs at the wall and seeing the baby chicks go flying. We're quickly approaching day 100, so I need to lock in if I'm going to be able to fill our entire island with builds. So after crafting up a bunch of materials, I got to work building a watchtower on the side of the island. I started by creating a strong foundation using a variety of tough, deep slate, and cobblestone blocks. On top of that, I made a wooden tower with an open area underneath it, where we'll have a 360-degree view of the island and ocean. With the outside finished, I got to work on the interior by first adding a door and then putting in a floor using oak slabs. We of course need an actual way to get to the top of the tower, so I added a pillar of oak logs with ladders on the side of it. Now that we have an easy way to get to the top, I added a lantern to light up the lookout area and then took a quick break to soak up the sunset. On the start of day 76, I finished the build by adding a pathway leading to the entrance. After that, I decided to fill out this empty space by the dock with dried kelp blocks and melons. I like how this also creates some storytelling, like people are delivering goods to the island. In preparation for my next build, I tore down the tree farm as this is where I want to build my nether portal. But of course, we can't just build some basic portal, so I got to work putting together a platform that I can sit on top of. I was inspired by the Aztec pyramids that you can find in Mexico. To add a bit of color, I used the flowering azalea leaves that we got back on day 62. After adding the portal itself, I lit it up with some flint and steel, but I'm going to hold off on going inside for the time being as I want to gear up more. So to procrastinate going into the scary nether, I did what I do best and created a path leading to the portal. After that, I checked in on the bee nest that we preserved a while back, but I think all of the bees have since disappeared. I still broke it with my silk touch axe and moved it over to the large tree beside our starter house. Who knows, maybe a miracle will occur and some bees will appear. I spent the rest of the day planting trees all over the island, which should help it feel a lot more lush and alive. On day 79, it was finally time to face my fears, so I grabbed everything I thought I would need, made some gold armor, and went into the nether. And of course, I got one of the worst spawns ever right in the middle of a basalt delta biome. After fighting off magma cubes and having a close call with a ghast, I finally made my way to safer ground. I spent a good amount of time mining quartz, as it's a really easy way to get a bunch of XP. I also gathered up a bit of glowstone so that we can use it around our base. I continued exploring and found a crimson forest, so I collected a bunch of wood, fungus, and roots, which will be fun to decorate with. I was hoping to find a bastion or fortress, but I didn't have any luck, so I went back to mining quartz and got even more XP. On day 81, I decided to not push my luck any further, so I carefully made my way back to the portal and went home. Since I have a bunch of levels now, I enchanted every single piece of my armor as well as my sword. The best enchants that I got were probably Feather Falling 4 on my boots and Looting 3 on my sword. I'm in the mood for more building, but I need to gather some materials first. First off, I hopped back into the nether to grab some lava to use as fuel. After that, I collected some clay from the bottom of the ocean that we can smelt into bricks using the lava that we got. We're also going to need a bunch of azaleas, so I used moss blocks and bone meal to gather a bunch up. On day 83, I continued gathering building materials such as sand for sandstone, stripped birch logs, and flower pots. After getting the last of the materials I need on day 84, I finally got started on our next build. I want to create a map of our island, so I think it'd be fun to have a house where we can display it. I started off with a foundation made of tough blocks, and then built up pillars around it using oak logs. For the second floor, I used a combination of birch and sandstone blocks, as I think they go pretty well together. For the roof, I went for a diorite trim, and then filled in the rest with a combination of deep slate blocks. For some final details, I added lanterns to light up the area, as well as a bunch of vegetation using azaleas, flower pots, and leaves. With the exterior finished, I of course had to connect the build with a path, and then I began prepping the interior by removing all of the grass blocks. This was the perfect excuse to use the blocks that we got from the nether, so I used stripped crimson stems to create the floor. And for just a bit of texture variation, I also mixed in a bit of the crimson planks. For the ceiling, I used quartz, which is a little bit bright, but I actually kinda dig it. After adding a ladder for access to the second floor, I used some lanterns to light up the room. For some final touches to the main floor, I added a planter box, random storage, and a small table. I'm ready to display a map of our island inside of the house, but I need more iron to craft maps, so it's time for a trip down into the mines. After finding a bit of iron, I stumbled upon a mine, which eventually led me into a mine shaft. I gathered all of the loot that I could find, and even got more diamonds while I was at it. The good luck didn't stop there though, as I also found a spider spawner where I found even more resources. And I couldn't help myself, so I continued exploring on day 89 and found even more diamonds. We still have a lot to do before day 100, so I figured I better not get too carried away and made my way back to the surface. I was able to get close to a full stack of iron, 17 diamonds, and a bunch of other loot. After smelting down the iron, I used it to craft some maps. It turns out that our island will perfectly fit inside of 2 maps, which is actually really nice. However, I don't love that the weird sandy area that we spawned on shows up on the map, so I want to get rid of it. To make my life easier, I decided to do some enchanting, as I still just have my regular diamond shovel. The first shovel I enchanted only gave me Unbreaking 3, which is nice, but obviously not really helpful for digging faster. So I enchanted another one and got Fortune 2, Efficiency 3, and Unbreaking 3. Still not the best, but way better, so I'll take it. With a better shovel obtained, I removed all of the sand and then updated the map. I think it looks so much better now. It took a while, but we can finally display our map in the house that we made for it. Our island is looking super cool from a bird's eye perspective. The second floor of this house still needs some love, so I got started on its interior by building the ceiling. With that in place, I built a seating area using crimson stairs and extinguished campfires. To add some greenery, I created plants using azalea leaves. I dotted a few barrels and chiseled bookshelves around, which really helped fill out the space more, and then for this last empty area in the middle of the room, I made a planter box with crimson roots in it. It's pretty simple, but I'm really happy with how the interior of this house turned out, especially because we have a dedicated spot for a map of our island now. With the house finished, I think it's finally time that we take on the trial chamber that we found all the way back on day 9. I've never explored one of these before, so I gathered everything I could possibly think of that I might need, and then went down into the mines to find it again. I began exploring and fought off countless mobs and collected a bunch of really cool loot. I continued into day 94, and honestly, I was having a lot of fun and probably could have stayed down here until the 100 days were up, but there's still some work that needs to be done on the island, so I went back to the surface. I'm going to do a tour of the island on day 100, so I want it to look as good as it possibly can. So after putting away all my loot on day 95, I got to work adding grass all over the island using bone meal. It might not seem like much, but this is really going to help the entire island look a lot more put together and lush. Luckily, I can make tons of bone meal from the bones we got down in the trial chamber, so that actually worked out really well. By the time I was done, the sun was already beginning to set, so I used the remainder of the day to replace the torches around our pumpkin and melon farm with glowstone. I really don't like having torches all over the place, so I think this makes it look a lot cleaner. The island is looking really green from all of the bone meal, which is awesome, but it could use some color, so I started day 96 by adding small flower patches all over the island. I also used moss blocks and moss carpet to add even more variety to the terrain, especially in the areas where we have paths carved into the hillsides, as I feel like it helps blend them into the environment better. After adding more moss on day 97, I went down into the mine to grow azaleas, which I then planted in front of our starter house. I want to upgrade our path by mixing in some packed mud, so I harvested some wheat and converted dirt into mud blocks so that I could craft some. With some packed mud obtained, I then got to work adding it into our pathways. We don't have much, so I'm using it quite sparingly. I continued into day 98 and also started incorporating just a little bit of granite as well. My hope is that this will make the granite slabs that we used for the slopes not stand out so much. With the path looking super snazzy, I went around looking for other ways to polish the look of the island. I noticed a tree was kind of encroaching onto our nether portal, so I started removing it. Of course, I got interrupted by some pillagers, and low-key my health got kind of low when I was killing them. I seriously got scared for a second that I was gonna die on day 98. It was all good though. I finished cutting down the tree and then moved it over a couple of blocks. It's a lot less in the way here. The last thing that I did on day 98 was replace my boring white bed for this cool green one that I found down in the trial chambers. On day 99, I went into the mine again to make more azaleas. Once I had a few, I used them to detail this hill by our watchtower, as I felt it was still looking kind of bland. I spent the remainder of the day bone mealing any remaining empty spaces that I spotted. With our island looking really put together, I ended off the day by organizing my items in preparation to tour the island. Alright, here we are on day 100 to tour our island, and we're gonna have to be a little bit fast because we built so much stuff in this world. I think we'll just start from one side of the island and work our way over to the other end. So on this side is our enchanting house. Pretty simple in here, but it has everything that we need, so honestly, I'm pretty happy with it. And then beside our enchanting house is our barn. I really love how the roof came out on this one, especially just like incorporating just a tiny bit of the birch logs. It looks really cool, really happy with it. We have our little pond here, pretty simple. I probably should have put some bone meal or something in the bottom there, but oh well. Over here is our little boat. Such a cute little just simple design. I'm really actually happy with how this came out. Don't often build boats. And then over here is our starter house. I just went for a really simple starter house for this world. We didn't really need anything too crazy. Up here is all of our storage, furnaces. Like we seriously did all 100 days with just 4 furnaces. It was all good, all we needed. We can check out our quarry next, I guess. It's pretty simple, but I'm happy with it. I really like how the boulders turned out. And then we have these like, supports holding up the actual ceiling. And then this is where we went down to, make all of our moss and get all of our diamonds, all of that good stuff. I'm pretty happy with how this portal came out. I maybe could have made this entire thing bigger, done more than just a regular sized portal, but overall I'm really happy with the, just shape and the vibe of it. Over here is our wheat and carrot farm. I was able to gather a lot of good stuff from here. It looks super satisfying with like the different rows. Over here is our map house where we are storing our map, and I actually want to quickly update that together with you. So this is what it's looking now. We didn't really add any buildings, but we did do all that, terraforming, added all of that grass. So you can see it's just looking a little bit more filled in, a little bit more lush. Update this one too. And yeah, that's looking really cool. I love just like the shape of this island and the layout that we came up with. You can see the docks on here. It all just looks super cool. I love it. Okay, over here is our pumpkin and melon farm. Just pretty simple. I mean, I didn't really need pumpkins and melons for anything, but just built the farm anyways to fill out the space. Over here is our vine farm that I actually haven't been in here since we first built it. Okay. It's kind of working. A lot of the stuff got blocked. I don't know why this isn't grown in here, but anyways, we have our vines here, good stuff. And then we'll take the path over to our watchtower. Actually, before the watchtower, let's check out our sugarcane farm. Again, I built this, never even harvested the sugarcane once after, but it's here if we want it. And then last but not least, let's check out the tower. Head inside here and go all the way up to the top. We should have a really good view of our island from up here. So let's just take a look over the edge. We can see all of our farms, all of our builds, and of course, we have the dock down there. I'm really happy with just how much we were able to build in this world in such a short amount of time. It's a pretty big area to get all filled in, but we were able to do it, and I'm really proud. I really hope you enjoyed this 100-day challenge, as I had a really fun time transforming this island. If you want to explore the island for yourself, the world download is available on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and happy building!